and women have been raped by Eritrean and Ethiopian military men. Because of the ongoing genocide, out of the 6 million population of the Tigray region, 5.2 of them are facing a man-made famine. This is all because the dictator in Ethiopia wants to stay in power illegally and unconstitutionally. We, as a global citizens, have the power to come together and stop the suffering of the innocent people. We are here calling on the US government to impose targeted economic sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea, to impose arms embargo so that these genocidal forces do not continue to buy armaments and kill innocent people. You can join our social media movement by using the hashtag Tigray Genocide on Twitter. You can also join our grassroots movement and lobbying efforts by talking to your senators and Congress people and pushing them to impose sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea. Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Isaias to the ICC!
Isaias to the ICC!
Isaias to the ICC!
Isaias to the ICC!
Drop food, not bombs!
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 If I can't hear you, they can't hear you. Who are we?
Tagaru!
Who are we?
Tagaru!
Who are we?
Tagaru!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want it?
Freedom!
What do we want it?
No!
What do we want it?
No!
Who are we?
Tagaru!
Who are we?
Tagaru!
Who are we?
Tagaru!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want it?
No!
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 Stop the Tigray genocide!
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 This is a peaceful protest against the ongoing state-sponsored genocide in Tigray, Ethiopia. For the past 9 months, the government of Ethiopia colluded with the government of Eritrea to bomb, rape, murder, massacre, and annihilate the Tigray people. Of the 6 million innocent civilians in Tigray, over 90% of the population is in need of emergency humanitarian aid. There's no food, no water, no gas, no electricity. The people are being annihilated in complete darkness. We've been fighting for 9 months on the street, but we can't do it alone. We need our allies and our outside communities to speak up on our behalf. We united together in the 80s when our people were starving, and we need to do it together again. The people have no food, no water, no aid. They've completely blocked access to the region, and the government of Ethiopia and Eritrea have weaponized hunger and rape as a means to further their own political agenda. We need to unite together and use our voice to bring an end to this. We've done it for the last 9 months, and we can't let up. Who are we? Who are we? Who are we? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want it?
I want justice!
I want justice!
I want peace!
I want peace!
We demand justice!
We demand justice!
We demand peace!
We demand peace!
Weaponized hunger is a crime!
Weaponized hunger is a crime!
Weaponized hunger is a crime!
Weaponized hunger is
a crime!
Weaponized hunger is a crime!
Weaponized hunger is a crime!
Stop the war on Tigray!
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 Ethiopia is guilty of genocide!
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 Wow.
Guilty of genocide!
Ethiopia is guilty of genocide. Somebody share this right now, because chances are you know that Ethiopia is guilty of genocide, but there's somebody out here, somebody that's one of your friends, your colleagues, someone that's in your particular circle that does not know that Ethiopia is engaged in genocide. It is unraveling. We are looking at the Tigray TDF at the doorstep of Finfini, and I think we're coming to another chapter in this story, but it's been over a year. We're at 369 days. We've been doing this for 369 days, and right now There's an incredible gathering of the Tigray community in Washington, D.C. If Prime Minister, or as I like to call him, 19th century Abiy Ahmed, if he has done one thing effectively, that has been organizing and unifying the Tigray people. Maleti, you just came back from Washington, D.C. It's 1 year later. We're talking about a genocide, 369 days. What goes through your mind when you even consider this?
You know what? It's crazy to think. I remember when the war first started on Tigray. You know, we were watching the election, watching Trump lose, and one of my friends comes in and she's in tears because they bombed Tigray and there's no power, there's no electricity, we can't call our families. It's just a blackout, complete blackout. And I remember the pain and thinking, oh my God, what do we do? We were all in kind of disarray. And so fast forward now, it's a shame that we're 369 days later and there is still a siege on Tigray. There's still no access, there's still no services, there's still no running water in the middle of a pandemic where you're forced to wear masks everywhere you go. They have no running water. So in many ways, it's pretty disturbing because the people still have no relief. There's still, all the borders are blocked. But in another sense, when you look at how quickly Tigray organized and how quickly everyone came together, it's pretty shocking. And now, like you said, the tables are turning.
The tables are turning. Maleta, you've been one of the loud voices or one of the foremost individuals in terms of educating, going out, doing journalism, dispelling myths, etc. Prior to this genocide, you were Ethiopian first.
I was.
And now, if I were to call you Ethiopian, what would be your response?
Oh, you see my facial expression, right? And it's a shame too, because I say this all the time. No one was more pro-Ethiopia than Tigrayans. In spite of everything that Ethiopia has done to Tigray over and over and over again, we always went, extended the olive branch. We always turned the other cheek. Over and over again, in spite of being bombed and starved and, the way they talk about Tigrayans as if we're some poor, helpless people who have no food, as if that wasn't like designed by the state to starve Tigray over and over again, So now, in the beginning, I would say we were a little bit lost. We felt like something was taken away from us, like our Ethiopianism was taken away from us, which is now, and fast forward to now though, and I'm just like, they actually didn't take anything from us. They actually helped us discover who we really are, which is Tigray.
Wow, when you think about the Tigray community, it's amazing. Over the course of 369 days, 370, depending on which part of the pond you're on which side of the pond, the Tigray community in the diaspora has heightened this this crisis, this genocide, to levels that you would have to be hiding under a rock to know that, or to not know that a genocide is taking place. And the Tigray community and the TDF, while the world is talking and passing resolutions and collecting stories, they're fighting for their lives. And as we said, very effectively, when you think about a small group of fighters that have defeated a foreign government, the Eritrean army, the Tigray community fighters have defeated a foreign force coming inside of Ethiopia. They have defeated the federal troops. They have defeated Amhara militia and Fano. What does that say about the spirit and the intensity and the determination to bring this genocide to an end?
One thing that I've learned is if the people are united, you will never, never be able to defeat the people. So you mentioned a couple countries. By my last count, Tigrayans were fighting 7 different countries. You had Somali troops who were tricked into this. You had the federal Ethiopian troops. You had the Amhara militias and Fano. You had drones from the UAE. You had Turkish drones. You had Israeli intelligence. I mean, there were so many different factors and players in the war on Tigray, and still, like, let me tell you, my faith and my relationship with God or whatever was really like teetering watching this happen, because I'm wondering how and why is this happening to Tagaru? Why are they once again being attacked by their own country? And so you start having all these questions for this so-called religious nation, supposedly, where Christianity arguably was the first or second, country to adopt Christianity. And so you look at that and, a place that protected Muhammad's followers, and you're thinking, how can a country with that type of history, with churches everywhere, and then you have deacons and priests and, the church, and literally supporting war, literally blessing soldiers to go out and kill and murder and attack and massacre and rape Tigrayans.
One of the things, Maleti, I'm looking forward to, and I'm seeing this also, not only the Tagaru community that has come together and have unified and have been victorious in all of the different attacks that you mentioned, but I'm really looking forward to the Tagaru people taking back their history and their culture.
Yes.
Because when folks say Ethiopia, which, by the way, I've been reminding individuals that Ethiopia is, they take a lot of credit for a lot of antiquity, but it's really younger than the United States of America. That's shocking to individuals to hear.
That's true.
But in your statement, you mentioned the oldest acceptance as a national religion in terms of Christianity. That was not Ethiopian. That was in Tigray.
Tigray, that's right.
That was in Tigray. Right. You mentioned the followers of Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sent his followers not first to Medina for the Hijra. They fled first and were instructed to go to Tigray first.
That's right.
This is a fact.
That's
when
right.
folks talk about the Ark of the Covenant, that's in Tigray.
That's in Tigray.
When folks talk about Queen Sheba and the palaces,
that's Tigray.
And so the moment the Tagaru people take back their history as well as their body, then you don't have much to speak of as it relates to why the world was so enamored with what they call Ethiopia. And when the world first noticed, and I'm talking about the outside world and the European powers, a lot of that came about because of the Battle of Adwa.
That's right.
That's what placed so-called Ethiopia on the world stage, and many Ethiopians were able to not consider themselves black anymore, because in a world of white supremacy, to have a black army defeat you, you can't say you were defeated by black and then still say that you are supreme.
Right.
So then you have to say, well, those folks weren't black who beat us.
Right.
And so,
right.
But that's where's Adwa?
Tigray.
So not only have the Tagaru people left the building, what happens when you take your history and your culture with you?
The whole 3,000-year-old history goes with us. That's right. No, you're absolutely right. And for a long time, Tagaru have been generous and have called that Ethiopian history. That's Tagaru history. The Aksumite kingdom, all of it is Tigrayan history. So we're reclaiming a lot of that, and we're reclaiming what's rightfully ours. We're raising our heads again and getting to know ourselves again, getting to know who we are as a people again. And so in many ways, and I've heard people say this over and over again, it's awful what happened to the people of Tigray. It's awful. The rapes, the massacres, the executions, the bodies being thrown and dumped into rivers and crossing international borders, and awful things have happened. Just bombing, nonstop bombing of Tigray. But what it's done in terms of uniting Tagaru is going to be the best thing that has happened to Tigray ever.
I want to do a little retrospective before we go forward, because even when we think about the current atrocities that are taking place. We've got 369 days of this. And you, I, and many have been following this since day one, which means a lot of individuals have forgotten past atrocities while they're being shocked at current atrocities. Looking back, you visited Sudan, my Kadra, and the myth that somehow the Tigray community, just after all of this time of, being side by side ethnically, just decided to engage in a massacre or violence, etc. Why don't we go back and tell me some of the things that really stick out that you believe or that follow you up to this 369th day?
The things that I remember, because I was one of the first with Tigray Media House, one of the first to go to Sudan and talk to refugees. Because remember, we couldn't get any information out of Tigray because all of the services are off. No phones, no internet, nothing. No electricity, nothing. So to get a true story of what was happening, we had to go to Sudan. And so when I went to Sudan, I was there for about 10 days or so. And the things that I remember being shocked and wondering as they were telling me these stories. I knew they were telling me the truth, but I was like, really? It was hard to really accept and believe the things that were happening. Things like there was a young man who when the Eritrean soldiers came through in Zalambesa, he was hiding, and his mom said, Filmon Wedde, go hide in the bathroom. The bathrooms are detached from the homes. Hide in the bathroom because they're going door to door to kill young men who may retaliate. So he goes to hide in the bathroom, and he's 18, 19 years old. And his mom, they break down her door. She doesn't open it willfully. They break down her door, and they throw a hand grenade and blow her up. But she saved her son. And so when they left, because they didn't know he was in the back hiding, when he came out, his mom is dead. And it was those kind of stories. And he just kept saying, she died for me, she died for me. And he was suicidal, actually, when I was talking to him. And he said, why would I want to continue to live? I've seen the worst of humanity. He said, my friends brought me here, but I didn't want to live. This is what's forcing every single Tigrayan to go and fight. It's not even by choice. They kept billing this as a war again, or selling this as a war of TPLF, this boogeyman, who's been haunting Ethiopia or whatever, in spite of how much TPLF has actually done with EPRDF to build that country up from the poorest nation in the world to an economic powerhouse with plenty of problems, with plenty of issues, with plenty of things to criticize. However, they threw all of that away and created this boogeyman and dehumanized TPLF. The problem is they went even further and they attached that to Tigrayans, period, calling them daytime hyenas, saying that they're a cannibalistic people, just real nasty things, and there was no check for that.
Well, that's the blueprint that introduces genocide.
That's right.
Because first you have to attack the humanity of an individual.
That's right.
To where folks don't see a human, they see a hyena,
an animal.
They see something that is destroying the country.
That's right.
They see something that is other and enemy. And those of us who study genocides know that, all you have to do is see what's happening in the forest, and you have to see the brittle nature of things that are taking place, and then just know that it will just take a little spark to send all of that ablaze. And so a genocide builds up over time, and genocides also have their own signatures.
That's right.
And this one is being fought on the bodies of women.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The gang rape of women and the way that women's bodies have been violated. I mean, rape is bad enough, but imagine gang rape. There is a woman who was raped by 23 soldiers so badly that her spine cracked. They were putting glass and trash and plastic. They were inserting that into women's vaginas. This is the kind of things that these people were doing. So, and they would say things like, "We're cleansing your blood. We're Amharanizing your blood." So, very, very much, it's. You're right. Every genocide has a signature, and this one was weaponized rape.
Well, I'll tell you all. It's 369 days. That's beyond a year. The Rwanda genocide took place over 100 days. We are at 369 days as the international community wrestles to figure out if this is a genocide. Is having hearings, is taking statements as,
concern and more concern.
you know, concerned, but not concerned enough to do anything. But now I heard, is it Jeffrey
Jeffrey Feltman went back again. So I just want to say one thing about this. One thing I think we've learned is just how limited the international community really is. You know what I mean? There were all these cries, and there was an actual physical war happening in Tigray, and then we in the diaspora were also in the middle of a war, an information war, a disinformation war, but also a political sort of like, you know, within the international community, trying to get them to understand what's truly happening to the people. And one thing that we learned is just how weak the systems and structures are within the international community to actually stop this. Tagaru saved themselves. Tagaru saved themselves. Everyone joined the revolution. Everyone did. And they didn't have a choice. It wasn't like some, you know, like, I want to be a hero and, you know, I'm going to go and fight and defeat these forces. It wasn't even like that. It was, I could sit here and watch my sister and my mother be raped, my daughter be raped, watch my son be executed myself, sit here and starve to death, or I can go and fight back. And you had doctors and nurses and teachers and actors and models and parents and, you know, just the average everyday person who was going out to fight for their freedom. Like, this is very existential for us.
When your life is on the line, you have one choice.
One choice.
And the Tagaru people have constantly exercised that one choice. You know, with all of that being said, I like how you say the awareness that the international community is very weak as it relates to their systems and structures regarding this particular genocide and others. But what I would add to that is they are very strong in terms of their political alliances and their foreign interests, and it has never been about the human rights of
Correct.
Individuals.
Correct.
This is about who's going to have that ability to stop that dam and to have self-determination.
Absolutely.
And you can say that it has something to do with the storming of the Northern Guard. You could say it has something to do with my Kadra. The only my it has to do with is the water.
That's right. Your Tigrinya is getting better and better.
Well.
Listen, you look at my shirt. I see some people making comments about my shirt, and I'll tell you where you can get it in the comments later. But Wayana is an ideology. You cannot kill Wayana. Wayana is about revolution, about revolting against oppression, right? You cannot kill an ideology. What Abiy Ahmed did backfired, and his desire to so-called, you know, catch, this is not an exaggeration. There were 60-some names that he had listed. Like, these are the people that we want to catch. People of Tigray, turn them over, or you all, you know, there will be a collective punishment. That's how this started. People forget this, you know, and they keep talking about storming a northern base. Let's just clear that up for the last time. What happened at the Northern Command was a failed coup. And Abiy Ahmed's feelings were hurt because clearly he's terrible in terms of commanding military. It was a failed coup, and now the people are being punished collectively. That is a war crime. You cannot do that.
Well, when you think about war crimes, the world is watching, but all you have to do is follow the patterns of history. And if you all have been watching, I've been giving some historical and some scholastic narratives as it relates to certain patterns. And humans are very, very predictable. And I'll be kind because you're next to me, but you know I go in. So I won't say certain things, but you know I go in when folks try to say certain things. I have to give them some information that they don't know about themselves, because oppressed people and people who have been oppressed, the last thing they do know is their true identity, which leads to their oppression. And so they carry the history and the narrative of the ruling class, and the more they get enamored with and the trinkets of and the education of their oppressors, the higher they rise up in an oppressive state. You
know, we kept making excuses too for a lot of these people. You know, and I see the comments, and you know, you see what people And, it used to really offend me, because initially, and don't forget, by design, what's happening in Tigray is not able to come to the forefront. We don't really know. What we know is already horrendous and horrific and crimes against humanity and evidence of genocide and all of those things. But we honestly still don't know what has happened and transpired within Tigray. It's going to be worse than what we know. And initially you had people, especially in the capital city, they were carrying on with their normal lives, there's the great run that Ethiopia does. And
we're out in Finfini?
In Finfini. Thank you for the correction. Just living normal lives, acting like nothing was happening. And it was in the beginning, it was really offensive, And I thought, do they not know? Maybe they don't know. This is another thing about Tigrayans. We're always giving people the benefit of the doubt. No, they didn't know. They're not getting the information. And it's true to some extent. It's state-owned media. They arrest journalists, kill journalists, throw journalists out of the country, control the amount of information that people can get. But when I look at other Ethiopians, even in the diaspora, it's really shocking to me. The hate is so deep. The dehumanization is so deep. That Tigrayans are left with no other choice but to rely on each other.
Well, you've got to do that. And let me just tell you all about some of the blueprints of genocide, dictatorships, fascism, etc. All the things that some individuals that are watching have mixed up thinking that they're participating in democracy. But here's one thing that we do know. When Mussolini attacked Ethiopia, if you want to call it that, when Mussolini attacked, that attack was already in progress. They planned that attack as far back as 1933. That whole wall attack and the blurring of borders and all those stuff, those are used as convenient excuses to implement what you already had in plan to do. Mussolini was already in partnership with the British and the French to do what was going to be done. His problem was he arrogantly and wrongly got on the side of Hitler. Now, with that being said, when you talk about the northern border and the attack, that is a convenient excuse. Prior to that, the Tigray was being choked out economically.
Yes.
The federal government was withholding funds.
That's right.
And they were blocking access for trade and free movement.
That's right.
All of this was happening prior to what we're talking about, the northern attack.
Yeah.
While at the same time, 19th century Abiy Ahmed, who gets a Nobel Peace Prize, and it's between him and Isaias Afwerki, but only one of them get a Peace Prize, but you would think that both of them would get it. Donald J. Trump, Mr. Make America Great Again, said it was he that was responsible for all of that, while at the same time, 19th century Abiy Ahmed runs the same play, like Make Ethiopia Great Again, red hat and all. His mistake was he was on the losing side because Donald J. Trump did not win a re-election.
Right.
All while this is taking place, 19th century Abiy Ahmed is meeting with a dictator of 30 some odd years up in Eritrea, and they're traveling together and they're eating gelato together and doing all of the different things, but they're really plotting and scheming to extend what Isaias Afwerki had already done in Eritrea.
Listen, Abiy Ahmed is a con artist on a scale that I don't think anybody was prepared for. He literally got a Nobel Peace Prize while planning war. We've never seen the agreement between him and Isaias Afwerki. We've never seen it. So you keep saying that there's a peace prize. Photo ops are not a peace agreement.
You can't have genocide and peace prize in the same body or even in the same sentence. They're they're the antithesis of one another. So with that being said, other things other than my Kadra, what else sticks out over this year retrospective before we get into where we're at now?
Well, I do actually want to talk about my Kadra because that's been the biggest mistold story of them all. And I can say that with a lot of authority because I spoke to people who were from my Kadra who are now refugees in Sudan, and the stories that they told, are horrendous. Okay, there was a clash that happened in my Kadra when the farmer. First of all, my Kadra is a farming town, a very very rich soil. Everyone is a farmer there. You know, they're close to the border. They trade with the Sudanese. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot. That's a very rich town in that way. And so people were coming home from farming, and they were met by Fano, an Amhara militia group, you know,
kind of like the black,
group.
like Mussolini's black shirts.
Yes,
fascism.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Local individuals that are empowered to brutalize and terrorize a local population.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And they came into the borders and or into the town, and they began attacking Tigrayans to take their, you know, people are coming home with their goods from farming. They're coming home with large amounts of money, right? You have checks, you have blah, blah, blah. They started attacking. And so there was a clash, is how people describe it. And it's interesting because I talked to people in different camps all over, because there's 4 different camps in Sudan. And so the stories are somewhat similar. So you know people aren't lying. And they're a little bit confused about the clash because they were completely caught off guard. And so what then happened is the men said, this is organized. Something's happening here. And so they fled and hid sort of in the fields, right, to kind of de-escalate the situation. What they didn't know is that these individuals would be going door to door and attacking women as well. And I think that's what threw everyone off, because you have war and you have conflict, and Tigray is no stranger to war because it's on the border, you know, the Red Sea, all of those things. So what they didn't expect, though, what's new is the brutality and the way that women and children were also targets. And you have stories too of some ethnic, like Walkites and some ethnic Amhara who actually hid Tigrayans in their home, like under beds and behind doors. So it's not a whole story of like an entire group of people, but you had this awful gangster group basically that came in and attacked. And so when you hear the stories about some, by the way, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN did an investigation where they didn't even get on the ground.
They investigated themselves.
You have one party to the conflict who's also investigating what happened. I mean, how does that even make sense on any level? It's ridiculous. But in that report, they talk about my Kadra, and they give the government story, and they talk about a group called Samri. We've never heard of Samri in the past. Never. It just pops up out of nowhere. They massacre a bunch of people, and then they completely disappear. We still don't know where Samri is or who this group is, which Samri, by the way, is a little girl's nickname. So if I'm a ruthless gangster, I doubt my gang name is going to be Samri. You know what I mean? So it's the stories and the way that these atrocities are being told is just really unfortunate, and all from the perspective of the Ethiopian government. So eventually there will be justice. Eventually there will be a true and real investigation.
It looks like you're closer to that than ever.
And people will be held accountable.
Well, let me ask this, because I've got some recollections also early when folks accused us of spreading fake news before even 19th century Abiy Ahmed admitted that rape was taking place. And one of the big things for me was when I was talking about, imagine if you were in New York and the federal government partnered with Canada to come in and bomb you. One of the things that stands out to me most is Eritrean troops inside Tigray partnering with 19th century Abiy Ahmed to terrorize, brutalize, and enact and wage war and systemic rape on Ethiopian citizens. That's what reshaped my entire romanticized Ethiopia has never been colonized view. That opened my eyes to say, I better go and do some more digging. Why is a foreign nation inside of an independent nation? And now when you have like Jeffrey Feldman and them saying, don't go into Addis Ababa or Finfini, like don't do it. I'm like, where was the don't do it?
When the Eritrean
troops were inside of a sovereign nation, raping, pillaging, they took spoons and plates and like, I can't understand, but that's one of the things other than the systemic rape that really stands out as we move forward to day 369.
I know what you're saying. Someone's saying my volume's not good, so I don't know if you can check on that. But that was one of the things that was really shocking, was how brutal the Eritrean soldiers were. And there's a lot that I could say about that. There's a lot. I mean, they came in and they raped and pillaged and looted and, intentionally destroyed the economy within Tigray. I mean, there's a lot of hate there. And I'm going to say something controversial. Eritreans are just colonized Tigrayans. Eritrea was part of Tigray. We were the same people. I mean, ask them who they were before they were Eritreans. They were Tagaru. They were Tigrayans. They were part of the Aksumite kingdom. We were all one people.
Well, I can back that up because I've been to a lot of rallies and protests and awareness campaigns. And one of the things that stood out as everybody share this, 369 days of genocide, 369 days of rape, 369 days of food being used as a weapon, 369 days of no communication, no banking, no access to health care, 369 days of genocide under 19th century Abiy Ahmed. I'm at a rally and I'm listening because there were Eritreans that were in support of the Tagaru community, and you could see the flags. All these different flags are around, and I'm looking at these flags, and I'm looking and I'm listening, and the Eritrean speakers were having the same language as the Tagaru speakers, and I know through my travels within Ethiopia, you got 80 different ethnic groups, very distinct languages, very distinct cultures, etc. But as I was listening to these two engage, I'm like, they have the exact same language.
They do. And I know what you're talking about. It was the one in San Francisco, right? Listen, there are some very righteous Eritreans. You know what I mean? We've talked a lot about the embarrassment of Eritrean soldiers and how they have embarrassed Eritrea and Eritreans. They will forever be known as rapists and Tupperware thieves, the way that they did Tigray. But there are some righteous Eritreans who are on the right side of history who not only oppose Isaias Afewerki and how he does their people. Forget about Tigray. Eritrea is the most repressive regime in probably all of Africa, I would argue. There's no internet. Their internet penetration is 2%.
They call them the North Korea of the continent.
And that's for a reason. They keep people in shipping containers as jails, makeshift jails, if you're anything anti-government. I mean, these people are literally roasting and dying in shipping containers, roasting to death.
Well, the way you can tell the difference in terms of who's on the right side of the issues, I was looking at, there were those that have a blue flag, and it kind of has a reef, et cetera, on it. And then there's this Eritrean flag that always shows up with this, I don't know. It's not let me just show you this real quick. Look at this, Maleti, and I want to just show this to you. There is no Ethiopian flag at this particular protest. None, but you see a Eritrean flag, and some will say that there is no Ethiopian flag, but I've seen Prime Minister or 19th century Abiy Ahmed in front of the Ethiopian flag. So they can't say there's not one. With that being said, I want you to go to this because at that particular rally, you're starting to see how the international conflict is carried out locally, because I believe you had a win, and some of your colleagues a win in a court case.
Oh, yes.
Yes. You all had a win in a court case. Maybe I'll show that clip, but I don't know. But talk a little bit about how this is bleeding out, or it is playing out,
the unholy alliance of the Amhara and the Eritreans shocks me till today. Now, Isaias Afewerki has done a really good job of brainwashing Eritreans and creating, again, a boogeyman out of Tigrayan people for all of the woes of Eritrea and all of the problems that are happening in Eritrea. That's one thing. But the unholy alliance of Amhara and Eritreans is what blows my mind. Don't forget, it was Menelik who cut the hand and the foot off of Eritreans and sent them, into Eritrea when he gave away Eritrea to Italians. Think about that. We actually defeated the Italians, and he still gave them land in exchange for an agreement that he didn't even understand, that actually backfired against him. And so when you see Eritreans aligned with Amhara in that flag, it blows my mind. And I'm like, what do your martyrs think? Your martyrs who helped fight against that, who were abused by Menelik. And that was intentional because Tigrayans as a whole people, when we were all one people, were way too powerful. And so it was intentional. The dividing of the now what's called Eritrea and Tigrayans, that was intentional. It was to weaken,
Well,
the
it
community.
played out locally. There were some court cases that were won because, even the judge found that, this is beyond, reprehensible. But then also some other things that stand out to me. The 19th century Abiy Ahmed has the Abun Nathis locked up. That's why I call him 19th century Abiy Ahmed, because that's the same thing that Tedros did. He had Abun Salama locked up, all while being righteous, etc., but locking up, the head of the church. The same thing 19th century Abiy Ahmed has done. But even in Denver, a local church put out a deacon because he was Tagaru.
So much has happened that we start to lose track of the atrocities and the crimes, be it in Tigray and in Ethiopia and here. But you're right. There's a local church that what is the name? A Medhani Alam Church, who put out a deacon who has actually been fairly quiet about what's happening. See, this is what Tigrayans do. They keep swallowing their pain and they don't speak out and speak up. And you say, well, this will pass. Well, this will pass. In fact, our parents always said that to us. This will pass. Like, don't make it, a big deal. And this guy, they not only put him out, they changed the locks. So when he goes to church Sunday morning, he can't unlock the door. That's how they did that. And it's interesting because Mariam Church on East Colfax is leading this genocidal support effort of the Ethiopian government. They have hired their deacon, Yosef Tafari, is one of the people who hired the lobbyist groups who are trying to change the narrative and the story of what Abiy Ahmed is doing. So it's very much deacons and churches and, leaders of so-called faith, who are advocating for war. It completely blows my mind.
Well, okay. Speaking of that, and then also a car dealership is firebombed. A local firebombing of a Tigrayan car dealership. And what we're doing, again, somebody shared this, 369 days of genocide. Someone doesn't know, but you'll let them know because you're sharing this. Even a Tagaru car dealership is firebombed.
A Tigrayan car dealership, and that individual happened to be a big donor to the relief efforts in Tigray. So here we are trying to donate to get food and medicine, because remember the Eritrean soldiers looted everything. And initially we heard the stories that we heard, because there have been moments where power has been turned back on or where phones have been turned back on and we get a little bit of information and then it's off again. But some of the information was that some of the federal soldiers were appalled by what Eritrean soldiers were doing. And they tried to say, maybe not stop them, but they were a little bit disgusted by it. But it didn't stop what happened. And so they looted the hospitals. They looted all the medicine. I mean, it was bad. So here we're doing these relief efforts to try and get basic things into the country, basic supplies into Tigray for women who have been raped. And so this owner of the car dealership was someone who donated a significant amount of money to that effort, and his business was a target of arson.
Wow, it's amazing. 369 days of genocide. Somebody share this. We're giving a retrospective on some of the things that are taking place. Do you mind if because I want to unpack something quickly. Again, Eritrea and Ethiopia they've been at odds for over 30 years. And then all of a sudden there's a peace prize that is given based on Eritrea and Ethiopia and Abiy Ahmed. And when you see these rallies, you see these flags of Eritrea with these flags that are not even Ethiopian flags. And I know it's nationalism, by the way. I know what nationalism is when I look at it. Nationalism is like, if you're not Ethiopian, then you're against us. And this is what it means to be an Ethiopian. And what that really means is something that diminishes other people's culture. You're not Oromo, you're not Tagaru, you're not Somali, you're not Afar. You're like one Ethiopia.
Which is erasure, by the way.
It's erasure.
It's an active erasure.
It's cultural appropriation. It's all of those different things. But I want you all to look at this clip, and then I want you to tell me if you see an Ethiopian flag, and I want to show you some of the intensity of even what's happening in the diaspora as we revisit some of what has been happening. Let me see. Some of what has been happening over the past 369 days. Let me see if any of this will play.
ሊሆኑ ስለሚችሉ ሲሪየስ የሆነ ቆራጥ የሆነ ህጋዊ እርምጃ በየቦታው እንዲያስወስዱ እንጠይቃለን። አመሰግናለሁ።
Yeah, I'm feeling my part of it. My people are being gone and being bombed.
I understand that.
Yeah, so... No, I'm not going to go. Eritrean troops out of Tigray. Amhara militia out of Tigray. Stop the genocide in Tigray. Amhara militia out of Tigray. Eritrean troops out of Tigray. These people are helping the dictators. They are living in the democratic country, but they are helping the dictators.
Thank you, Itachi. One day,
It doesn't matter about whoever's in power. You should have stood with us when they tried killing people.
Guys.
You should have remembered that. You should have stood
Attention,
with us
please.
when they tried
Turn
killing
around,
people.
guys.
It doesn't matter about the PLF.
Attention, please. One day.
Instead, you guys are
Yeah,
all
you know, distract just forget them. ምንድነው የዚህ የሰልፍ አዘጋጅ ኮሚቴዎችም ዓላማ ጫና መፍጠር ነው። የኮሎራዶ 2 ሴኔተሮችና 7 ሃውስ ሪፕሬዘንታቲቮች በኮንግሬስ ይገኛሉ። እያንዳንዳቸውን እኛ ራሳችን መርጠን ነው እዛ የወሰድናቸው። ይሄ የኢትዮጵያ አይነት ምርጫ አይደለም። እዛ ማዶ ሲጮሁ የምሰማቸው እነሱ ለ30 ዓመታት ሲያደርጉት የነበሩት አይነት ምርጫ አይደለም። እዚህ ስናደርግ የነበረው እኛ መርጠን ነው እዚህ ቢልዲንግ ውስጥ የከተትነው እና የኛኑ ሀገር ኢትዮጵያን አጌንስት ኢትዮጵያ ሊቆም አይችልም። ልናቆመው እንችላለን። ሁሉንም ጄሰን ክሮን ሁላችሁም ታውቁታላችሁ። የኤርትራውም አለ ወንድማችን ጆ ንጉስ እኮ ሁሉንም መርጠን ነው እዛ የወሰድናቸውና እያንዳንዳቸው ልንጠይቃቸው እንችላለን እየደወልና ዓላማችን እሱ ነው። እዚህ ጮህን ዝም ብለን ልንሄድ አይገባም። እያንዳንዱን ቢሮ ኮንታክት ማድረግ አለብን። እነሱ ናቸው ከኮንግሬስ ኢትዮጵያ ላይ ጫና እየፈጠሩ ያሉት። ቢኮዝ ሄዶን አገኝ ኢንፎርሜሽን እንደዚህ አይነት ውሸታሞች፣ ሌቦች እነሱ ናቸው ኢንፎርሜሽን ሌብነታቸውን፣ ውሸታቸውን ልንነግራቸው ይገባል በየቦታው። ዋናው ግን ይሄ ሰላማዊ ሰልፍ ዶክተር አብይ ለመደገፍ የተደረገ ሰላማዊ ሰልፍ ኢትዮጵያ ለመደገፍ
Tell me the government of Eritrea has been massacring the people of Ethiopia, the people of Eritrea, destabilizing the Horn of Africa. You want to talk about that? Talk about that. Talk about the people that are dying every day. Stand for the people. Stop supporting genocide. Stop systematic mass starvation. Stop starving people. Stop raping people. Stop raping women.
Stop genocide. Hey, if you don't go to the bottom, you're going to get a ticket.
Stop weaponizing
Go to the bottom and yell.
Stop weaponizing basic human necessities. We're
Stop weaponizing basic human
necessities. For you.
Are you with them?
Media. You enjoy here.
Hey, it's all the way to the bottom. Stop weaponizing Ethiopia.
You're going to talk about that. Talk about the people that are dying.
ከነስማቸው ደደቦች ናቸው። ሌባ የኢትዮጵያን ሀብት የዘረፋችሁ ሌባ
that's just some of what's been taking place over the past year. And so much passes by that we forget about all of the activity, all of the activism. There's no Ethiopian flag in any of this. Like if somebody was to take a look again and just look, and you will just see there's no Ethiopian flag. So it would tell me that if this is about one Ethiopia, if this is about any of that, folks would be concerned that there are Eritrean troops inside of Tigray or inside of Ethiopia, all the way down to the Oromo community attacking citizens.
Absolutely. Eritreans are, you're right, they're now all the way into Oromia at this point. We were actually maced at that event. There was a woman who is a nurse by profession, who maced us at that event. We ended up all going to court, and the judge said, "I'm glad she didn't have a machete." Because we know how that would have ended. So even the judge was disgusted by their behavior. I'm like, this is America. You're awful things have happened here, but you're not getting away with that like you do in Ethiopia.
Well, it's been 369 days of genocide. Maleti, thank you for staying on top of this and for being a voice of the voiceless, because inside of Tigray, there's no communication. Like, many individuals have not had access to their families. They don't know their health condition or even if they are still alive. And genocide is an attack on historical sites, on individuals based on things that they cannot control. And if you think that this is not an attack on the Tigray people, even if you're outside of Tigray, I'm hearing that those that are in Finfini, they're being attacked.
They are being attacked. And, and to jump to where we are today, there was an awful video that came out because the Ethiopian government is playing with the lives of poor people's children, sending all these kids into war, untrained people, untrained militia groups into war. You see video of people with machetes, and they're going to go out and fight, against a state army. I mean, it's really bad. And there's a video that came out of Oromo young men who were being forced onto buses to go and fight, and their mothers are losing it. This is what's happening right now in Ethiopia. Forced conscription. We're looking more and more like Eritrea every day.
Well, that's a game plan from ISAF Worky.
That's right.
Like at a certain age, you've got to go to the military, and it's almost a life appointment, a lifetime appointment. That's is modern day slavery. I want you to, before we wrap up, I want you to talk about Washington, D.C., and I want you to go through your notes and talk about what you all talked about, what it's like moving forward. But speaking of Washington, D.C., all right if I play a clip from Washington, D.C.? I want to see what's going on in Washington, D.C., and see if you recognize this particular individual in Washington, D.C., who just got back to where she resides.
Help us, fellow Americans. Help us end the Tigray Genocide!
End the Tigray Genocide!
End the Tigray Genocide!
End the Tigray Genocide!
As we speak, there are concentration camps that have been set up in Addis Ababa. They are literally going door to door, business to business, and arresting people for no other reason than being an ethnic Tigrayan. Can you imagine that in the 21st century, people are being ethnically profiled and put into concentration camps and completely disappearing? We can't allow that to happen. You maybe never heard of Tigray, but I know you know that genocide is wrong. Concentration camps are wrong. Every human rights group on earth has put out a report to say what's happening in Tigray is wrong and a crime against humanity. So please, it's easy to help us. Help us spread awareness today, right now, with your phones. Take a photo, take some video, share it with the hashtag Tigray Genocide, and help us end the Tigray Genocide!
End the Tigray Genocide!
End the Tigray Genocide!
End the Tigray Genocide!
I'm sure you care about women, and I'm sure you care about children. Women have been gang raped by multiple soldiers. I remember a story about a woman who was raped by 23 soldiers. They raped her so badly that her spine cracked. This is what's happening to Tigrayan women in Ethiopia right now. So we need your help. Weaponized rape is a war crime!
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 Weaponized rape
Muleta. Thank you, Muleta, for being here with us.
Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. Just back. That's fresh. That's like hot off the presses. What's going through your mind? And then what was discussed or achieved, or what would you like to report from Washington, D.C. as we've passed 1 year of genocide?
Yeah, so there was 4 days of actions in Washington, D.C. related to the 1 year mark since the war on Tigray began. And a number of things happened. There were marches and car caravans and a number of other things that, gatherings and, at the Washington Monument, bringing Tagaru together. And part of it is still to raise awareness. Part of it is we were meeting with legislators. There was this amazing exhibition that was put together by young artists that show you the stages of genocide. And then they went a step further and put actual evidence under each stage with photos and quotes and screenshots, screen grabs from, elected people, part of the government of Ethiopia, and the things that they were saying. And it is, you talk about making the case for genocide. It was really, really powerful and really, really disturbing at the same time, because so much has happened in the last year that I think we're all really traumatized, and we also, you don't have time to grieve one thing and you're moving on to the next thing. And so to see it all laid out that way was really powerful. And that was set up for journalists and legislators to come in and see, everything put together. And so that was a really powerful event. And there have been a lot of developments. So we didn't mention it yet, but there was actually a signing of essentially a government in exile, sort of. So the downfall of Abiy Ahmed is it's coming, and he will be toppled. There were a bunch of pro-federalists from different ethnic groups around Ethiopia who came together at the DC Press Club and signed. They called themselves the United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces, and they all met in DC and they signed, I guess, an agreement of how they would govern once Abiy Ahmed is dethroned, because he does think he's a king. And so I think that's a pretty significant development. TDF is at the doorsteps of Addis Ababa, and they were asked not to go in. They were asked to wait. And that's why they haven't crossed over until the government in exile formations and things like that were taken care of. That diplomats, families from around the world have all left. There was a mass exodus out of Addis Ababa. And all of this is within the last week. So there have been so many developments.
High profile or even communication journalists, et cetera, that were speaking on behalf of the government of 19th century Abiy Ahmed, they're fleeing too. Everyone's out.
Oh yeah, the Kellyanne Conway of Ethiopia, Belen, she is in hiding right now, apparently in the palace, trying to get out. I think a number of them are trying to flee. As a matter of fact, Abiy Ahmed has put a travel ban on his own regime so that they wouldn't leave. Someone from his regime paid 500,000 birr to escape and get out on a flight to IAD to America.
But I understand that his family's gone up in Switzerland. Like, why do you send your family away and then everybody else has to stay and fight?
That's what's such a shame. He saved his family, but he's telling you that your children should go sacrifice their lives for him, for his rule.
Wow.
It's a shame.
Stop the genocide in Tigray. And things are moving rapidly. The United States government and other foreign governments have encouraged their citizens to leave. Like, leave now. They're saying you have a small window to get out, but if you don't leave, there's nothing the U.S. Embassy can do to help you get out. They see what's happening. Everything is moving. What do you think when folks still say things like fake news or stay out of this, or even they have laughing? And, I know on the other side of 100 days, you were disturbed when you would see, folks you grew up with or around, et cetera, didn't even call to check in, or just was just kind of like, you know what?
It's propaganda and, all of that.
It's not a big deal. And then when we're talking about genocide on the bodies of women, you've got all these women organizations. Many of them are silent. It's almost like if the Tagaru people, they have some allies, but by and large, they've had to fight to this point.
No,
virtually alone.
Tagaru saved themselves. Nobody helped us. And you know what? That's a good thing, because now we don't owe anybody anything. Once we get to freedom, we don't owe anyone anything, because no one came to the rescue. And there are alliances now, you're right, OLA and TDF. And, there are some international folks who have tried to speak up, but not fully. Tagaru fought and saved themselves. And so the stories that will be written about this are going to be incredible. And Tigray will write their own stories again, because people have tried to tell our stories for us in the past and they didn't do us justice. But, the fake news and stuff doesn't bother me anymore. I mean, one more development that I want to share is the African Union, which has been pretty silent and worthless throughout this whole process. Obasanjo met with the president of Tigray recently. So that tells you a lot about how this is developing and where this is going. They wouldn't have met with them if they didn't think they were a legitimate government and a legitimate leader. And so things are changing, and they're changing quickly. And, they keep saying fake news, but then there's video and there's photo. I mean,
Well, even Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, 19th century Abiy Ahmed, said it was happening. He said there were Eritrean troops inside of his country. He said rapes taking place. And even those with him continue to say that's not true.
Exactly. He did finally admit it. He was denying it initially, but then he did admit it. But he admitted it in a very crude way. He said, well, at least they were penetrated by men. Our soldiers were penetrated by bayonet, referring to the Northern Command. So the man is really evil. If you take all of his, I hope somebody can go through and take clips of all of his speeches and just put them together with translation, because you will see that this is a madman who learned a lot from Trump, by the way. So the fake news and, all of this alternate universe stuff, that's just a book out of Trump's
It's the fascist playbook.
It is the fascist playbook.
It's very interesting. For those of you who are keeping up, it's 369 days. Some of the things that come to mind is the report that deals with the massacre in the holy city of Aksum, the report that talks about I don't know if they even thought I was a human. It talks about, the rape. Other things that come to mind, Doctors Without Borders, some of their doctors being murdered while trying to provide care. Red Cross, other humanitarian organizations calling and pleading and documenting the starvation and saying that there needs to be resources. Other things that come to mind is 19th century Abiy Ahmed putting humanitarian workers out of the country. All of this has happened.
All of it has happened. And he admitted that the blockade is intentional. The international community kept calling it a de facto blockade, but it was actually by design. And he admitted it. And he said, if TDF retreats and goes back to Tigray, go back to where they came from, then he would lift the blockade. So, I don't understand why the international community still wants to negotiate with this man and try and bring him to the table. There's no way you can bring this type of ruthless leader to the table. The only place he needs to go is the ICC.
I think that they have turned their back on him. They know that he is on his way out, and he's playing his cards in an interesting way. But with that being said, 369 days of genocide. Somebody share this. Maletti, I also just, kind of want to see what your vision is for the future. Like the rebuilding, the healing, the coming together. You've had textile factories destroyed. You've had land destroyed, trees cut down. Like, you have a government that has done everything to destroy everything that has been built, even the Ethiopian economy and the stability that was there, that was being heralded by the outside world, the fastest growing economy, etc., incredible tourism, research, and all those things have come to an end. So much so that Moody's has almost made their credit rating almost junk bond status.
That's true. And actually, you brought up something else for me that happened in the last couple of weeks was Ethiopia got removed from AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which helped build a lot of those textile and gives favorable trade, basically, deals. So brands like Victoria's Secrets that get manufactured in Ethiopia, they got thrown out of that, which is really unfortunate because it's primarily women who work in those type of factories and things. But the irony of Ethiopia that did a whole campaign to try and save Ethiopia from being removed from that trade agreement was the Ethiopian and Eritrean government bombed AGOA textile factories in Tigray and didn't say a word about the thousands and thousands of Tigrayan women who are now out of work, who can't feed their families. So, I think what we've learned is that Tigray will save themselves. Tagaru will go back and rebuild better than ever. We will forever tell our own stories. We will never allow anyone to tell our stories again. And we will never be in a position where this can happen again. And I don't know what that means, because I'm an American citizen. I don't get to decide what Tigray looks like from a political perspective, but Tigrayans will get to dictate that. And whatever that looks like, whether it's staying a part of that awful country or it's, separating from them, God knows, the people know. I mean, that will be determined at a later point. But at this point, it's not even our focus. Right now, our focus is there is still no food. There is still no running water. There is still there are women who were gang raped who may need services for babies that they're carrying now, or if they aborted babies. There is a woman who drank bleach to abort her baby because she did not want to carry her rapist's baby. This is the kind of stuff that's happening and the decisions that these people are having to make. So we need to get to the people. All of this is happening because Abiy Ahmed refuses to lift the siege on Tigray. So that is our number one goal. And then we'll rebuild better than ever. Tigray will be the next Wakanda.
Well, I'll tell you, it's great, being with you, and also knowing that the Tigray people are fighting in the diaspora and at home. 19th century Abiy Ahmed has united individuals who didn't know they were Tigray. They just thought they were Ethiopian. And even if they knew they were Tigray, they were Ethiopian first. True. Now when they say, who are we, Tigray, what does that mean?
That means resiliency. That means survival. That means history. These are God's people.
Wow. There you have it. I'm going to end by saying Tigray Tisser.
Tigray Tisser. Tigray Sa'ira.
Kibrit Yahabali.
Kibrit Yahabali.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yekin Yele, salam, salam. I'm just telling you, it's 369 days of genocide. Before we go, there's a question from Shabazz. Who's supplying the weapons? Because usually the outcome of these efforts as it relates to African nations, victory is on the side of who's getting the weapons. And you mentioned all of the places that 19th century Abiy Ahmed has utilized to defeat the Tigray people, and it hasn't been successful. Do you have any thoughts in terms of the ability to continue to fight back, or alliances, or what does that look like?
So in terms of who's supplying weapons, we know that the United Arab Emirates and the Turks have supplied drones. We know that there's Israeli intelligence that's been used during this time. We know now that the Chinese are supplying drones. We know that Abiy Ahmed has been on a buying spree to get weapons. And so actually one of the things that was talked about was sort of a ban to not sell an arms embargo on Ethiopia. And even though that's more symbolic, it would at least be a message to a lot of these countries who are supplying him. As far as the Tigrayans, when Abiy Ahmed was bombing Tigray, he says that was to destroy, like arms and whatever armaments that were located within Tigray. But a lot of the weapons that the Tigrayans got were from retreating forces. And so they were able just to collect that stuff. Although there is one really brilliant story that I want to share, and I can't wait to go back and really document and interview and talk to people who were a part of this. But at one point, the Tigrayans had to bury things. They had to bury their armaments and things. And so there was a point where when they had Mekelle, when the Ethiopian government had Mekelle, that they were literally driving over weaponry that was hid underground. And so when the Tagaru were able to beat them out of Mekelle, they were able to unbury those weapons.
Well, I've been in Mekelle and was in one of the museums, and I just remember seeing when there was the fight against the Dergs and others, they had no weapons, so they trained with sticks. And so when folks looked at them and saw the shadows, they thought they had weapons, but when they engaged in battle, once they defeated the individual who had a weapon, they took those weapons, and that's how they built their armory. Correct. By disarming their opponents.
Correct.
And building their own armory based on their fighting spirit.
That's correct. That's correct. There's a lot of comments from people who want us to talk about what's happening in Addis Ababa, and we touched on it earlier, but I do want to just emphasize that ethnic Tigrayans are currently being arrested in mass and being held in concentration camps and taken to unknown places. We have no idea if people are alive. We have no idea about the condition. And it's truly for no other reason than being ethnic Tigrayans. So I see a lot of comments for people who came in late, and we did talk about it earlier, but that is, and what's sad about that is so many of us have family in Addis Ababa, and we won't call and check on them because we know how deep the spy system is in Ethiopia. So you can't call and have conversations in Tigrinya with people.
Wow. All the way in Finfinny.
In Finfinny. Thank you. Finfinny. Finfinny.
Finfinny. You know, with that being said, 369 days of genocide, 369 days of rape, 369 days of food being used as a weapon, 369 days of starvation, 369 days of no banking, no internet, no hospital, 369 days of refugees, 369 days of a great portion of the Tigray people being displaced internally and externally. And all of this was being discussed well on the other side of 100 days. We're at 369 days. If you think it was bad then, just imagine how tragic it is now. And like you said, Maleti, you won't even know what that tragedy looks like until the lights come on.
That's true. That's true. And I want to go back to when we were talking about what does the future look like. Tigrayans never wanted to separate from Ethiopia. That wasn't like a goal of this or whatever. Ethiopia has forced it upon us by othering us, by putting us in concentration camps, by saying it's us against them. Ethiopia created that narrative with the help of Abiy Ahmed and unfortunately an Amhara supremacist culture and society that Ethiopia basically runs on. They've othered us. They've pushed us out. So if there is an independent Tigray, Ethiopia can blame itself.
Wow. Imagine when the Tigray community unites with the Oromo community. The Oromo is the largest population inside of what's known as Ethiopia. It won't be able to stand if that unified front stands, and there's enough discontent in all of these different states to show that the support that 19th century Abiy Ahmed had when he took office in a democratic fashion.
Right. That's a good point. There was a peaceful transition there. I mean, there were protests.
The only peaceful transition in the history leads to someone who has grandeur ideas like Mussolini of restoring Rome.
Man, that's a good point.
He didn't come to power by anything other than the democratic process that was fledgling and coming together. He finds himself in an interim place, and prior to an election in an interim place, all these deals are made. We're going to privatize this. We're going to build that road here. We're going to do this. All those deals were cut. But now he finds himself in the Zemene Mesafint 2021.
But all the signs were there. We just weren't, I think there was just a hope that something different was happening. But, the jailing of political opposition. By the way, those very prominent Oromo leaders are still in jail.
Or murdered.
What do we know at this point?
Well, they murdered the cultural talent, murdered the attorneys. And the sad thing about it is that 19th century Abiy Ahmed has Oromo ethnicity attached to him. And that was what propelled him in terms of the support, to coming to power. And then the first thing he did was bomb the Oromo people.
Exactly. It's disturbing. But his days are numbered.
His days are
numbered. The developments are too fast. I mean, you can't, within an hour or two, there are more developments. So his days are numbered.
Maleti, final comments again, and then shout out to everybody who's been raising their voice, traveling, sacrificing, and doing whatever you have been doing. And one thing you can do is share this for somebody who may not know that there's a genocide taking place. Maleti, final words.
I just want to speak to Tigray people and just say, we have been fighting for a year, largely alone, but we're close. And defeating Abiy is not only a success for Tigrayans, but it will help a number of different people within the country. So I look forward to it.
There's some individuals that speak Tigrinya. Maybe you should say something to them in Tigrinya.
I did.
And more. There you go. Like I say, Tigray Tisser.
That's right.
I'm gonna stick right there.
There you go.
Again, 369 days of genocide. We'll stay on this. We will stay on it. And the Tigray people have fought for 30 years. They fought for 30 days, 369 days. They will fight for 30 centuries as it relates to self-determination and remaining true to who they are and not being oppressed. And if you don't believe me, they beat the brakes off of everybody that's come across that Red Sea from the north. All of those battles of foreign nations being whooped happened in Tigray. And I'm not just talking about the Italians. You can talk about the Egyptians, and you could talk about a whole bunch of others. They are the ones that fought on their soil and have done a great deal of the victorious battles. We'll talk about all of this in the future, but right now we wanted to just say, stop the genocide in Tigray. 369 days of genocide, Tigray Tisser.
Allow humanitarian access!
Allow humanitarian access!
Abiy Ahmed to the ICC!
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 Reconnect Tigray!
Reconnect Tigray!
Reconnect Tigray!
Reconnect Tigray!
Reconnect Tigray!
Reconnect Tigray!
Over 20,000 young girls and women have been raped by Eritrean and Ethiopian military men. Because of the ongoing genocide, out of the 6 million population of the Tigray region, 5.2 of them are facing a man-made famine. This is all because the dictator in Ethiopia wants to stay in power illegally and unconstitutionally. We, as a global citizens, have the power to come together and stop the suffering of the innocent people. We are here calling on the US government to impose targeted economic sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea, to impose arms embargo so that these genocidal forces do not continue to buy armaments and kill innocent people. You can join our social media movement by using the hashtag Tigray Genocide on Twitter. You can also join our grassroots movement and lobbying efforts by talking to your senators and Congress people and pushing them to impose sanctions on Ethiopia and Eritrea. Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction
Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Sanction Ethiopia!
Isaias to the ICC!
Isaias to the ICC!
Isaias to the ICC!
Isaias to the ICC!
Drop food, not bombs!
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 If I can't hear you, they can't hear you. Who are we?
Takaru!
Who are we?
Takaru!
Who are we?
Takaru!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want it?
Now!
What do we want it?
No!
What do we want it?
No!
Who are we?
Takaru!
Who are we?
Takaru!
Who are we?
Takaru!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want?
Peace!
What do we want it?
No!
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 Stop the Tigray genocide!
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 This is a peaceful protest against the ongoing state-sponsored genocide in Tigray, Ethiopia. For the past 9 months, the government of Ethiopia colluded with the government of Eritrea to bomb, rape, murder, massacre, and annihilate the Tigray people. Of the 6 million innocent civilians in Tigray, over 90% of the population is in need of emergency humanitarian aid. There's no food, no water, no gas, no electricity. The people are being annihilated in complete darkness. We've been fighting for 9 months on the street, but we can't do it alone. We need our allies and our outside communities to speak up on our behalf. We united together in the 80s when our people were starving, and we need to do it together again. The people have no food, no water, no aid. They've completely blocked access to the region, and the government of Ethiopia and Eritrea have weaponized hunger and rape as a means to further their own political agenda. We need to unite together and use our voice to bring an end to this. We've done it for the last 9 months, and we can't let up. Who are we? Who are we? Who are we? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want it?
I want justice!
I want justice!
I want peace!
I I want peace.
We demand justice.
We demand justice.
We demand peace.
We demand peace.
Weaponized hunger is a crime!
Weaponized hunger is a crime.